So first of all, I hope all of you have been having a wonderful day and getting to learn a lot of things. Every time I'm at leadership, I always learn so much more, and I always think, given the time I spend up here and in meetings about Barnard, that I know so much, but clearly lots to learn. So I hear I'm also learning with all of you. So thank you all for your time and spending the day with us. And again, for some who weren't there in the morning, just a shout out to the Leadership Assembly Committee team for all of their work in pulling this together. And of course, to the Alumni Relations Office, we just get to be the face of this, but they're the ones that do pretty much all the hard work. So, but now what we get the pleasure of doing is having a conversation with President Sian Beilock all about what's going on at Barnard. We want to keep it a bit of a conversation. We have some questions teed up, obviously leave room and time for all of you to ask questions. And if they're really hard questions, I'm sending them to Sian. And it's hard for me to believe it's been a year that she's been here, a little bit more now, I guess. And it's been a pleasure to work with her and her team that she's been building. But for those who don't know about Sian, and we're working on shrinking your introduction, but you have done so much great stuff, so it's hard. So prior to coming to Barnard, she was at the University of Chicago, where she served on the faculty as a Stella M. Rowley Professor of Psychology, a member of the Committee on Education, and as Executive Vice Provost and Officer of the university. She's also, as many of you probably know, one of the world's leading experts on the cognitive science behind choking under pressure. Yeah, it's a good book, by the way. I did read it. I think it was my homework before she got here. She's the author of her book, Choke, and How the Body Knows Its Mind, and both have been published in over a dozen languages. So, again, we're so happy to have you. Please come on up. Let's get chatting.
Hi, everyone. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
So this is, I think, the first time we've done this little model, so we'll see how it goes. If I have a future in, I don't know, in the press or something. But anyway, like I said, it's a pleasure to have Sian here with us and to learn, more about what she's been doing, what's going on campus. And year after year, I tell myself that if I were applying to Barnard now, I would not get in. And I know I'm not the only alumna that says that. So I'm curious, and I'm sure we're all curious about the class of 2022. Wow. And if you can tell us a bit about them, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so the class of 2022, who've been on campus now, this is their 6th week of classes, is just absolutely fantastic. And we again had another record-breaking year for applications. So we, this past year, had almost 8,000 applications for 600 spots. We set a new record, and actually this makes us one of the most selective of all colleges and universities in the country. And what is so fantastic about our class and what we do at Barnard is that we really work to build a diverse group of young women who we bring to campus. And that's because what Barnard is about more than anything else is academic excellence. And you can't have academic excellence unless you have different viewpoints at the table, different lived experiences, young women who've come from near and far. So our class of first years this year, the class of 22, about 45% identify as women of color. Over 15% are first generation college students. We have 10% international students. They come from 33 different countries, and our domestic students come from 44 different states. And we have about 15% of students who have a grandmother or a mother or a sister or an aunt who were Barnard alumni as well. So it's just a fantastic class.
So often it's so fun to meet these students and learn about all of their experiences, and and talking about diversity, inclusion, and all of that. I mean, it's clear from what you said about the incoming class that that's a big focus area for Barnard. But how do you look at it beyond the admissions process and the students themselves?
Yeah, I think it's important to always remind ourselves that Barnard was founded on an idea of giving educational opportunities to people who wouldn't otherwise have it. And in that case, in the late 1800s, it was women. And now what I really think about is the fact that ability is so much more widespread than opportunity. And so what we're doing is providing opportunity to young women who wouldn't otherwise have it. And one of the reasons we can do that is that we are need blind in our admissions. We don't look at financial need, and we meet full financial need. There's not that many institutions that can still talk about that, and it's a big lift for us. We use a lot of our operating budget. In fact, a quarter of our operating budget each year goes to financial aid, and the gifts that we receive, the philanthropy, are a really important part of us being able to provide fantastic opportunities for our students. And one thing that's really important is that when students come in, that we meet full needs such that they're not coming out really burdened with huge loans and amounts. And that's something that we're always pushing towards. And last year for our class of 2018, I'm proud to say that our students who had financial aid on average came out with a total just under $17,000 in loans. That's it. We'd like to get that to zero. But to answer your question, which I haven't answered yet, it's not just about bringing different students to campus, it's about ensuring that we're supporting students once they're here. And so we're thinking a lot about how we do that at all different levels. One thing that I think is so amazing about Barnard is our focus on writing. So every first-year student, regardless of where she came from in terms of high school, goes through an intensive whole year writing experience. They take first-year writing, and they also take a first-year seminar, a small seminar with a senior faculty member, where they're learning to argue from theory, to write with an authoritative voice. And this is something that we help all of our students ensure that they really are facile with their writing and communication ability. And then we're thinking about how we support students at all different levels. And I know a lot of you heard about our new initiative Beyond Barnard today. And that's another example of how we're ensuring that regardless of where a young woman comes from, that she's getting the experience, the networking, being able to connect with alumni so that she can go off to succeed, whether it's in academia, in government, in nonprofit, industry, the arts, you name it.
Can you tell us a bit more? I had the pleasure of sitting on the Council on Diversity and Inclusion last year and hope to and plan to continue doing that, which is great. But if you can maybe tell the group a little bit more about that, how that came about and how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, so last year we established the Inaugural Council on Diversity and Inclusion, which brought together alumni, faculty, students, and staff to think about how we're addressing diverse perspectives across the campus. And there are not that many opportunities to bring together all these different groups to have conversations about what it means to come together with different viewpoints, different lived experiences, how you have difficult dialogues where not everyone agrees, where some people feel uncomfortable, how you get to common ground and learn to have those conversations. And so this council is thinking across the college about ways to help enhance what happens in the classroom, what happens outside, working with students. There's a great exhibit that they have sponsored called Unseen, which helps put pictures of young women and alumni from underrepresented groups on the walls around our campus. I think we often walk around institutions where we only see pictures of men, and this is taking this a step further, making sure that we see women in leadership roles, but also diverse women. And the council is sponsoring many different events across campus and really is a way to have a dialogue across different sectors of our community and also to think about how we continue to evolve and make Barnard the best place it can be.
So maybe to shift a little to talk about, at inauguration, which I can't believe so far away yet feels so recent, but you talked about your vision for the college and how, a focus on the sciences and how that sort of is well intermingled with liberal arts. And how do you think about that, going forward here at Barnard with the new Milstein Center and generally, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I want to be clear that it's not the liberal arts and sciences. Sciences are part of the liberal arts, and so I'm always correcting people when they write that. And it's just a false idea that you can be eminent in writing and humanities and social sciences, anthropology, and that has to be at the exclusion of also being eminent in the sciences. We can be eminent in all of these areas. And one thing that I bring to the table as a female scientist, and as someone who's spent her career actually looking at the anxieties and stereotypes that women and girls feel in math and science, I bring a new look to that. And really to think about how we integrate science and computational experience across the curriculum, because whether you're going to be an art historian or you're going to work at Google, you need some of those same skills dealing with data, being able to argue from an empirical standpoint, being able to communicate. And so we are moving in fantastic directions in the sciences. I'm proud to say now that we have 34% of our graduates last year were math and science majors, which is just impressive. The national average for female math and science majors is 21%, so that's a great number. And another thing that's really impressive, another number that I love to talk about, is that a third of our underrepresented minorities are math and science majors, which is a big and impressive, I think, statistic for how we're helping to open up opportunities for all sorts of young women to explore and pursue passions in this area. Our faculty are really on board. Our faculty approved a new curriculum a couple years ago that asks all of our students, regardless of major, to take courses that allow them to learn to think empirically from data. All of our students, regardless of major, to take courses that push them to think computationally and digitally. We're one of the only colleges and universities that has a requirement that everyone take courses around computational and digital literacy. And I'm pleased to say that a few weeks ago, we recently announced our first inaugural chair of computer science. So we're starting computer science on our side of the street.
Can you, I don't know, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have read about it, but if you can talk a little bit about the department and how you see it.
So Rebecca Wright is going to join us in January from Rutgers. She does cybersecurity, so it's an important topic. And she will be the Druckenmiller Chair of Computer Science, and she'll also run our Vagelos Computational Science Center in the new Milstein Center for Teaching and Learning. And one of the reasons we're so excited about Rebecca is that she's not only going to focus on our computer science majors that have gone from in the 10s to the 60s in terms of numbers. So we have, I think, 64 at present. Is that right? I'm getting the number right. But she's going to think across the curriculum with the faculty about how we integrate computational skills and experiences into everything that happens. And that's really something that is so neat about the new building, is that it's a place where you cross disciplines. It's a place where you merge technology with disciplines that maybe haven't encountered it in the same way. So we have a movement lab devoted to dance and technology. We have a digital humanities center to think about how the humanities interact with technology. And of course, we have a computational science center. And I think we're all really excited to see how that unfolds and to see how we then think about computation across the curriculum. So in areas like political science, we're looking for a new faculty member who approaches political science from a computational perspective. We can think about this in all sorts of different ways. And just as the arts and the humanities inform what we do in the sciences can in turn inform back. And it goes to the whole ethos that we are not teaching our students what to think, we're teaching them how to think.
So I love when you talk about how your major doesn't define what you do after Barnard or in the future, and I've been involved with the mentorship program for a long time, and people have often asked me, like, oh, did you know you were going to do what you're doing when you were in college? So I work in digital payments, like the Apple Pays of the world, and I always say, well, when I was in college, the iPhone didn't exist, let alone, a way to pay from said phone and so on and so forth. And they was like, oh, well, what did you major in? How did you, figure that out? And okay, I was an econ major. Okay, fine, you could say financial services, but it didn't really matter, and kids are still asking that question. So I think now that we can go and tell these students, like, actually, well, one, listen to your college president. She's saying it doesn't really matter. You can go on to do different things, which is fantastic. And now with, Beyond Barnard, we all heard from AJ and Nikki earlier, and I think there was actually a lot of really good questions and a lot of wanting to continue, to learn more, and in terms of volunteer opportunities. But and I'd love to hear more about kind of your thoughts around that. But also, how did you kind of get to this point in realizing like this is how the world really works? And it doesn't really, right? Because you kind of think about it, we all sit in our world and our work, and we're like, yeah, it makes sense. I did econ. I'm going to go be an investment banker. But that's clearly not the case.
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't get there on my own. I have a great team and great people around me. But one of the nice things about coming in with fresh sets of eyes is you can look around and think about what's working really well and where there can be adjustments to meet need. And when I got here, it was really immediately apparent that we were asking students to make up their mind about what they were doing before they went to get advice. So we had one office, a career center devoted to thinking about going into industry, and you went somewhere else if you were thinking about law school, and somewhere else if you were thinking about med school, and somewhere else for your first internship. And really, after talking to students, after talking to alumni who I think most of us have had pretty non-linear paths to where we have been, we really thought that creating one office and initiative where students could go to think about what their first fellowship, first internship would be, where students were getting the message that your major doesn't dictate your career paths, and where really the ethos of the liberal arts is that we are teaching students skills that span across disciplines. So by combining all these different areas and being very clear that this is a place for students to go to start to explore, and that they don't need to know where they're going to be, and that it's actually the same skill set that you need to go into industry versus go get a PhD in sociology, the ability to write well, to deal with data, to argue for a particular perspective, to think historically, to think from diverse perspectives. It really came together, and I'm so excited. AJ and Nikki are fantastic leads on that. AJ actually worked for me at Chicago, and so when I got here, I called him up right away. And it's just, the students have been interested, and they've been through the door. We just had a fantastic opportunities fair you might have heard about, where we had over 60 companies on campus recruiting our students. And now, Beyond Barnard is also working with faculty to think about opportunities at Columbia across the street for our students. So soon we'll be rolling out a whole menu of programs that we're talking about as 4+1 or 5-year programs, where in 5 years our students get a bachelor's at Barnard and a master's at Columbia. So we already have one in international relations. We have a cohort of 6 students doing it this year. We're starting them, and we'll be announcing within the next month, with the Mailman School of Public Health. So in 5 years, students will get a bachelor's and an MPH. They apply in their junior year, no GREs, they're tracked in. There'll be a Barnard advisor and a Columbia advisor. And the other one that I'm really excited about, you can't talk about it yet because we haven't officially announced it. We're starting one with the School of Engineering. And so it will be a bachelor's to a master's in engineering. And one of the really neat things that we're doing is we're pulling from all different disciplines. So you could think of economics to engineering. We're hopeful to think about architecture to engineering. And the idea is to think about what our society needs pushing forward, and that's people who can think creatively coming from different areas. And we're so excited about this. We think it's going to be a model set of programs. We'll be announcing engineering in the middle of the month, and then we'll go from there.
So many of us had, different reasons why we came to Barnard, how we found ourselves here, our experiences here, how we talk about Barnard, what does Barnard mean to us, what does it mean in the world today. So given the world we live in, given what Barnard has done so incredibly well and where we're continuing to grow and get even better, I'm sure you get this question all the time, but why Barnard? Why today? Why now?
Well, I'm a little biased.
I think we all might be.
Yeah. But I really think there's never been a more important time to be helping push forward our young women to go out, to find their voice, and to pursue their passion, and to make their mark in whatever way that is. And Barnard's really singular in its ability to do that, because not only are we focused on empowering young women, We have a world-class curriculum with faculty who are tenured at both Barnard and Columbia. So they're at the top of their fields, but they work so closely with our students. We have this academic relationship with a major research institution, but we really can focus and think very one-on-one with our students in impressive ways. And then, of course, we have this amazing campus, which is New York City. I don't think there's a campus that rivals that. And people often ask me, is there only one type of way to do education? Is it only a women's college? And what I say is, I don't think there's actually one type of way to do education, but what I think Barnard gives students are elements that you don't see elsewhere. And I'll give you a couple examples. One, we know from social science research that it's so important to see people like you in leadership roles and succeeding for you to adjust your own confidence and ideas about whether you can succeed. 60% of Barnard faculty are women, which changes what students are seeing about women in leadership roles. We also know that you have to explicitly talk about gender issues, and tackle them. We know there are stereotypes, for example, that girls aren't as good at math as boys. But if you'll allow me to maybe swear for a second, we know from the neuroscience research that that's bullshit. There are certainly gender differences between men and women, but there are no biological reasons that women should be any worse at math and science than men. And the way I talk about this is that math is actually a recent cultural invention. And in fact, if you look at where it is in the brain, it's duct taped onto an area of the brain that was meant to do something different, our fingers. That's why we have base 10. There's absolutely no way that when math has come into play and how we've evolved, that could lead to gender differences that affect how we perform. It's societal impacts. It's what students are being told at every age. And we know that when you identify these stereotypes and talk about how they're not true, and help students find that confidence, that it changes how they perform. So what we're doing is we're giving these young women the mechanisms to go out, to break down those walls, to see people who can succeed, and we're really giving them the power to find their voice. And one of the great examples I like is from our first-year writing program, where our faculty talk about how to tell students and teach students how to own their argument. So rather than writing, I feel this way or I feel this way, that way, what you can say is, I've noticed X, Y, and Z, and this is why I'm coming to this conclusion. And this is why I'm owning this particular perspective. And that completely changes the authority related to a view. And it then allows you also to change your mind if you notice other things. And I think just that example is such at the heart of what Barnard is doing. We're teaching our young women to get the evidence that they need to have an effect on this world.
We need that clip on like every single piece of content we put out. So while I may have lots more questions, I do want to make sure that you get questions from my fellow alumni. So I think there are mics somewhere, and there's a question right here at the front.
What you report on diversity is beyond inspiring. It's something we should be shouting to the world. But I have a concern, and you probably know more about this than I do. Working its way now through the legal system is a super, super, super challenge to that. It survives by the skin of whatever because of one vote on the Supreme Court. It is almost inevitable that is going to be overthrown. Our youth, is it too soon for us to be thinking about how to retain this focus and this ethos in the light of what's likely to happen?
Yeah, so it's a great question and one we're thinking about a lot. And this is referring to the case with Harvard right now and now Yale, really about the question of whether or not they're making admissions decisions based on race. The Supreme Court right now allows us to consider many different demographics in what we do, and I think it's really important to be clear that we do not use quotas, we do not look at particular numbers, but what we do is consider the whole individual. That includes academic, it includes demographic, and we're really, first of all, devoted to doing that, we're committed to doing that, and we see that we'll be able to do that in many ways hopefully regardless of what happens with this case, but we are watching it very closely and we're strategizing about how we continue to push for the types of things that are so important, which at the heart of it is social mobility, bringing young women in from low-income backgrounds and allowing them to push up to different opportunities. And we feel confident that we'll be able to maintain that important ethos of what makes Barnard so special. But yes, my legal counsel is spending a lot of time paying attention.
Thought I saw a hand. Oh, there are many hands.
Hi, I'm Debbie Davis, class of 1987. And one of my favorite things to say is that being part of the class of 87, I was the first class to choose Barnard, being the first class when Columbia went co-ed. And I love to say it because I did choose Barnard. I might have gotten into other schools. I didn't even try to get into other schools. But at any rate, I feel there was a lot of pride around that in the time that I was there. I have two daughters. One graduated 2 years ago from Columbia College. The other's a senior at Columbia College, so clearly I'm a failure as a mother. But I'm increasingly concerned with my daughter's view of Barnard women. And as well, one of my daughters, my older one, just came back from a medical school interview where there was another Barnard student, or she's Columbia, but there was a Barnard student there who insisted on having her name tag changed. I don't want to out anybody, but to Columbia. I'm concerned that there's still a lot of tension between what people think are other people's perception of a Barnard woman versus a Columbia woman. And I'm interested in your feeling about that because you came here. So if you could address that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Barnard has changed a lot. Our young women are choosing to come to Barnard, and they're making decisions not necessarily between Barnard and another women's college, actually. They're making decisions to come to Barnard relative to Penn and to Brown and to Hopkins and to Berkeley. Who we compete with in terms of our students, our peer group is changing. So we really compete in that Ivy Plus group. And I think it's continuing to talk about how impressive our Barnard students are, and also to talk about not only the value of Columbia to Barnard, and I do think there is a big value, but the value of Barnard to Columbia. And I've been doing that in many ways. One is I went to speak to the Columbia Board of Trustees last year. That hadn't happened since anyone can remember that a president went.
Ever, but I don't know if that's really true. But
I talked about how important Barnard is to the Columbia ecosystem. I think Lee Bollinger has recognized that, both at my inauguration, coming over for the Milstein opening, and it's just continuing to tell the story of how impressive our young women are. And I will say, just in terms of these new programs that we're announcing, the Columbia Professional Schools are literally drooling over the opportunity to take our students. They're impressive academically, they have a worldview, they articulate a viewpoint, and so it's just continuing to have the dialogue in that way. And I can say that we have, our application numbers and what we look like in terms of demand, it's really, people are starting to really feel how impressive. It's always been there, but they're seeing it in a new light. And coming from the University of Chicago, I was curious about the academic excellence at Barnard. And I have to say that I don't see any difference in the faculty between Barnard faculty and University of Chicago faculty. The students at Barnard are so impressive, and it's just continuing to push and tell that story.
There's a question back there.
In my mind, this is sort of a similar question. When you joined the Barnard community, and the New York Times commented on it, they referred to Barnard as being part of Columbia University. And I got really upset about that, maybe incorrectly, but it frustrated me because I had always, when I was a student in 97, Barnard was, I forget how we said it, but like a companion school or had a relationship, and it wasn't part of Columbia University. And so I went through all the websites to see what the relationship is, and it always seems vague in places. And I think it makes a lot of sense for the school since our, the 125th anniversary, there's been more branding around the school. So I just wanted some thoughts on that, if you could.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we don't get to control what the New York Times writes, although we would like to. So I will say that Barnard has a lot of treasures, and so that's great in terms of telling the story, but it also makes it a little bit complicated, right? Because on the one hand, we have the power of being a fantastic women's college, but we also have the academic resources of Columbia. And so really talking about what all that means, how Barnard is singular, is where we've really been focusing. And of course, it's then difficult to go into the whole corporate agreement with Columbia. And so I just brought on a new vice president for communications, Gabrielle Simpson, and one of her sole goals is to work on how we talk about what Barnard is and how singular it is, what it means to be boldly Barnard, what the Barnard advantage is. And so we talk about Barnard as being academically related to Columbia University, but certainly, and Barnard is considered one of the 4 undergraduate colleges, but certainly it's not just in Columbia University. Barnard benefits from Columbia, and Columbia benefits right back. And so that's a lot of how I've been talking about it.
How many? Yes. One more, do we have time? Do we have time for one more, Kelly, or how are we doing? Keep going. Oh, awesome. Please, go ahead. Right there.
In order to maintain diversity, despite what happens with the Supreme Court, where are you doing your recruiting now? Because if I recollect, some of the focus on recruiting in high schools was it wasn't that you were saying we're only going to admit a certain percentage. It wasn't a quota a few years ago when it was discussed. It was more, we are recruiting applications from a much more diverse population. And just as we are need blind, we are looking for the best and the brightest. And since we're recruiting in a very diverse area, we are intaking a very diverse group. Is that still being followed?
Yes, and we spend a lot of time and resources in admissions to give opportunities for interviews and also to think and ensure that we're looking at a very wide swath of schools in terms of who we're recruiting. We also have several programs that we've initiated and in fact just increased one from a gift that we got called Barnard Bound, where we actually fly in about 300 low-income students who are thinking about applying to Barnard, and we help them through their application and financial aid. And some of them will not come to Barnard, but the idea is to open up the opportunity and to provide them with ideas about what it might be like to be a Barnard woman. And it's a really fantastic program, and we're now able to expand it, not just to do the fly-in, but we'll be doing programs across the country all year long. And so we have a big focus on that because we want to get the best and most diverse students into the application pool so that we have really, we're trying to create a hard job for ourselves.
Oh, there are several. One here, and then we'll go back. Oh, okay, never mind. Go ahead. Okay. Well, we're going to start over there. We'll bring one over here afterwards.
I really liked what you were saying about teaching the kids all of the diversity and inclusion, and then also the language of reframing. I've noticed this, I've noticed that. Are you using any language, in these fractious and increasingly polarized times, to be able to teach them how to disagree without being disagreeable?
I think it's so important. We are teaching and should be teaching our students is to how to have conversations with people who don't agree with you, and because it makes your argument better. If you just talk to people that agree with you, you're not as sharp and articulate. It's not the excellence we're striving for. So we're creating ways to do that and modeling that in different situations. We just had a conference that the students actually initiated, run with our Council for Diversity and Inclusion, a couple weeks ago that was talking about, it was called the BOLD Conference, and it was talking about how we think about teaching from different perspectives in the classroom. So a question students have had is, how the Western canon fits into having other points of view in English classes, and how do you talk about that? These are not always easy discussions to have, but the idea is to model these difficult conversations and difficult discussions, and we're really excited to push that forward and to think and provide opportunities for our students to actually disagree with one another and to have different perspectives at the table. I can't think of actually something more important that we could do in this time.
Yes, thank you, Sian. I'm Harriet Cohen. I'm class of 52. Having looked around here all morning, I may be the oldest graduate here. I believe I'm the earliest class here, and I am a practicing lawyer 24/7, and I owe it all to Barnard. So, and I enjoyed very much your remarks last night, which were extraordinary. And today has been extraordinary. I just want to plumb down a little bit on, and I'm following up on my colleague's question earlier about the Supreme Court case and Harvard and Yale and diversity. I believe you indicated that 45% of the entering class qualifies as some kind of a diversity, and if I heard you correctly. Since the lawsuit has to do with the disadvantage that the Asian applicants are suffering, I was wondering, or are alleged to be suffering, I was wondering what percentage of the 45% are Asians, please?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think maybe 15% of the 45%. But so what I think is most important in thinking about this is how applications map on to the demographic that's getting into your system. So who's applying and who you're bringing in. And we really take a holistic view. So we're bringing students in across different ethnic categories, different socioeconomic categories. So we're thinking about this in a very broad way.
Two. One. Mary Beth.
Thank you so much for, again, hosting Leadership Assembly, and it's been a great experience, as always, talking to the various alumna who I haven't met before and others who I've become friends with through being involved in the college, so thank you. Since I think a lot of us are here to learn more about how we can raise funds for the college, what is the school's greatest need right now from your perspective, and how are you attempting to address that need?
So I will say that Barnard punches above its weight in terms of our endowment, in terms of what we have to support all the fantastic things that we're doing. And one thing that's so important is just contributions to the annual fund, to what's happening at Barnard. And one thing that we're really pushing for is to have more participation from our alumni writ large. So where we hope that you can be helpful is not only in terms of your own participation, which we certainly appreciate, but in terms of being ambassadors for others to give to the college. What giving means, it's a sign that you believe in what we're doing, in the mission. And it's so important for many aspects of what we do. Our participation right now is at 21%. Our women college peers, our Ivy college peers, 40% on average. It's just, it's abysmal, and we shouldn't be there. When we talk to people about how important it is, about the fact that Barnard uses a quarter of its annual budget every year to support financial aid, about the fact that we're constantly recruiting professors who come from the best institutions, who are being picked off to go to the best institutions, that we need those funds in order to continue to be excellent. I think they understand and want to give back, but it's really telling that message, that what giving to Barnard means is really saying, I believe in the power of an education that essentially allows women to go out and change the world. And we hope that you'll help spread that message. Any gift matters, any gift counts, and together we can do something that's really powerful. And so we're working to push that in every way possible.
There's one up here.
Hi, I'm Catherine Brewster, Barnard class of 1971. I'm really excited to hear about this ongoing commitment to diversity and inclusion, and that it's now about 45%. And also the Beyond Barnard. That's to me is a very exciting program going on. Picking up on the idea of disagreeing without being disagreeable, and being empowered as a woman in the workforce. I wanted to ask you about the current situation between the administration and the faculty unions, and particularly around the adjunct faculty, and where that is right now.
Yeah. So Barnard has several unions on campus and has good relationships with them. We 3 years ago entered into our first union contract with adjunct faculty, so faculty who are not full-time faculty, and it really was a model contract for higher education. We were able to provide greater job security, increased wages, and other institutions have looked to what we've done. As with the implementation of any new contract, there are disagreements or disputes that come up, and we've been dealing with them through the course of the contract. But I think we've been off to a great start. What we do want to protect is our faculty's right to decide who's in the classroom. That's part of what academic freedom is all about. But I'm really excited for where we've gone, the advantages we've been able to give to our adjuncts moving forward, and the continued support.
One last question in the back right there. You're up.
The reasons that you believe our participation rate is so low, because it strikes me that if we can be clear about your beliefs about this, then it perhaps will make it easier for us to strike back and be clear about how these things are just not true.
One I'll say is I don't think oftentimes alumni realize how low our endowment is and how much every dollar matters at Barnard. And so sometimes I think there's confusion about, we certainly share academic resources with Columbia, but we don't benefit from Columbia's financial resources in the same way. So just being clear, every dollar at Barnard matters in terms of meeting our bottom line, in terms of meeting the need of students who need that. And I don't think we've always been clear, and I also think we always haven't done a good job of asking and talking about it. It's been something that hasn't been talked about, maybe not thought to be something appropriate to talk about, but that's over. We are a premier institution. We are producing amazing young women. We are producing amazing scholarship. We are having an impact on the world that is so important. And every academic institution can only have that impact with financial support. One thing that I always say is that Barnard was founded on an idea, not an endowment. I would like it to be founded on an idea and an endowment. But so we're playing catch up in some respects in that way. And I also think traditionally, if you look at the pattern of giving for women, oftentimes what we've seen is that women aren't giving as much as oftentimes their spouse is, for example, even to their undergrad institution. So changing how we think about owning the future of the young women who are coming after us and the importance of that is so important, is so vital.
So that is a perfect way to end. So thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. I can speak probably on behalf of all of us that we learned a lot and are looking forward to all the great things to come.